Norman Lear was the first person that got me. I mean, I was playing jacks with his daughter. Norman says to my dad, you know, this kid is really funny. My dad said, what, that kid? That kid, he's a sullen. He sits quiet. He doesn't, you know, he's not funny.
Norman Lear was the first person who truly saw something in me, and that moment never faded, not even with time. I was just a kid sitting on the floor, focused on a simple game of jacks with his daughter, not trying to be clever, not trying to perform, not chasing approval. It was an ordinary afternoon that turned unforgettable in a single sentence. Out of nowhere, Norman looked up and said to my dad, "You know, this kid is really funny." My dad didn't hesitate for even a second. He looked genuinely confused. "What? That kid?" he replied. "He's serious. He sits quietly. He doesn't joke around." That reaction said everything. Even back then, people were already seeing different versions of me depending on where they stood. One person saw stillness and thought silence. Another saw observation and thought timing. That early moment had nothing to do with punchlines or comedy. It was about perception. And that idea would quietly follow me for the rest of my life, shaping how I understood people, power, and truth. For more than 4 decades after that, I avoided answering one question directly. Every time interviews drifted toward All in the Family, I praised the writing, the bravery, the cultural impact. I talked about the risks the show took and the conversations it forced into American homes. But I always moved carefully around one name: Carroll O'Connor. On screen, we were locked in constant ideological warfare. We shouted across a living room that reflected the deepest social divisions in the country: race, class, gender, authority. Nothing was off limits. But off screen, there was silence. And silence is dangerous because it invites invention. That silence fed rumors for years: ego clashes, buried resentment, hostility. People assumed never healed before his death. The absence of explanation made speculation louder, sharper, and more permanent. When I finally spoke plainly, what I admitted didn't just surprise people, it rewrote the entire narrative. It didn't just change how the public saw the man behind Archie Bunker. It forced me to confront myself too. The first real collision between Carroll O'Connor and me wasn't loud, explosive, or theatrical. It was calculated, tense, and intentional. When I joined All in the Family in 1971, I immediately understood something crucial. This was not a comfortable set. This wasn't about bonding, laughter between takes, or easy chemistry. This place was a pressure chamber. It was designed to provoke, to challenge, to push ideas until they cracked or revealed something honest underneath. The show existed to ignite conflict, not soften it. My character, Michael Meathead Stivich, wasn't just a role or a personality type. He was a counterweight, a moral battering ram. Every line I delivered was engineered to corner Archie Bunker, to force confrontation, to expose hypocrisy without mercy. Mike wasn't there to win arguments. He was there to apply pressure. By the time I arrived, Carroll O'Connor was already in full battle mode. Behind the scenes, he fought Norman Lear relentlessly over scripts, tone, and intent.
Rob's my closest friend. He's a wonderful, wonderful person and a great director.
Rob was my oldest friend. It's that simple. He's the person that I've known the longest. Met him when I was 14 years old.
Rob changed the course of my life, and if he hadn't, I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you now.
He believed Archie could not be allowed to drift into parody. He warned repeatedly that if Archie became funny without consequence, the character would become dangerous. That belief wasn't abstract. It was personal. Carroll understood something most people didn't. Archie wasn't just a joke machine. He was a mirror. And mirrors only work if they're honest. That tension lived in the air on set. You could feel it in rehearsals, in pauses, in how lines were delivered and redelivered. I walked straight into that storm without any protection. O'Connor didn't greet me with warmth or reassurance. He didn't explain the rules. He watched me instead, closely. During rehearsals, he studied how I moved, how I spoke, how I reacted under pressure. Then he tested me. He altered his timing on purpose. He held silences longer than written. He delivered lines with unexpected force that threw off rhythm and comfort. That forced me to drop habit and react honestly in real time. The arguments on screen weren't just scripted debates. They were lived moments of collision. Those insults came fast and sharp. He delivered them with such conviction that I sometimes questioned whether the anger stopped when the scene ended. The emotional weight didn't vanish when the cameras cut, but the real confrontation never came through yelling. Carroll never raised his voice. Instead, he corrected quietly, directly, and without drama. One time, he told me something I never forgot. If you don't believe what you're saying, the audience will know before the laugh track does. That line hit harder than any insult ever could. It wasn't criticism, it was a standard. And it changed how I worked forever. That moment marked the beginning of something far more complex than rivalry or ego. Carroll O'Connor never wanted obedience from me. He didn't want agreement or safety. What he demanded was resistance, real resistance that could stand toe-to-toe with Archie Bunker. I learned quickly that survival on that set didn't mean avoiding Carroll's intensity. It meant meeting his standard head-on, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it burned. By the time All in the Family reached its 8th season, something strange had happened. The conflict between Archie Bunker and Mike Stivic had become routine, predictable, mechanical. Archie barked insults like clockwork. Mike fired back with moral certainty and sharp facts. The audience laughed, nodded, argued at home. But nothing actually moved anymore. Even I could feel it. The fights had become circular, loud without progression, noisy without transformation. Then came that episode. Two's a Crowd didn't look special on paper. It was a practical solution. Lock 2 characters in one location. Save money. Fill airtime. Archie and Mike get accidentally trapped overnight in the storeroom of Archie's bar. A bottle of liquor appears. Time stretches. What was supposed to be another verbal boxing match slowly transformed into something heavier, quieter, and far more dangerous. What most viewers never realized was that the emotional core of that episode wasn't written at all. It didn't exist on the page, in the script notes, or in the stage directions. That center was carried silently by Carroll O'Connor for years. He had been holding it back on purpose, building Archie Bunker's inner life privately, carefully, and with discipline. He understood something most performers never risk. Once pain is named out loud, it can never be taken back. Once the audience sees it clearly, the mystery disappears. O'Connor knew that exposing Archie's pain too early would weaken the character. Archie wasn't meant to be explained away or softened quickly. He was meant to sit with the audience, uncomfortable and unresolved. That restraint took patience, it took confidence, and it took a willingness to be misunderstood for years. So when Mike finally asked, "I don't understand how you get to feel this way about people," O'Connor recognized the opening immediately. This wasn't another argument. This wasn't politics or ideology or point scoring. This was confusion. Genuine confusion. And for the first time, Archie didn't dodge the question. He answered honestly, not defensively, not loudly, honestly. He talked about his father, not with bitterness, but with loyalty. He didn't frame the past as abuse or trauma. He framed it as structure, as order, as the way things were done. Harsh discipline became guidance. Confinement became education. Cruelty became love. In Archie's mind, those experiences weren't harmful. They were proof that someone cared. Archie explained that the man who taught him to play ball who held his hand when he learned to walk, could not possibly have been wrong about the world. That emotional bond mattered more than logic. If that man believed certain people were dangerous, then Archie believed it too. To reject those lessons would mean rejecting love itself, and Archie wasn't willing to do that. Later, O'Connor explained that confession in the simplest possible terms. The poison got into the system, he said. It was passed on. Archie's prejudice wasn't random. It wasn't performative. It wasn't a choice made in adulthood. It was inherited. It was absorbed. It was learned long before Archie ever questioned it.
It's only hard to reveal that stuff to then get told, you're a spoiled, white, rich kid, and it's like, okay, maybe all these things.
You just have to know what you do, and that you have to block out all that extraneous noise, and it's hard for him because this is the first time. He's, all of a sudden, there's a lot of attention, people are talking.
This wasn't an excuse for hatred. It was a diagnosis, a clear-eyed explanation of how fear survives across generations, how damage moves quietly from parent to child without ever being named. Rob Reiner understood that instantly. And instead of responding the way Mike usually did, with arguments, speeches, or facts, he changed his approach completely. He stopped pushing. He stopped correcting. He listened. That silence mattered. He let the moment breathe. He let Archie speak without interruption. And when Archie eventually passed out from exhaustion and drink, Mike quietly covered him with a blanket. That action wasn't scripted. It wasn't discussed. It was a deliberate choice made in the moment. And it changed everything. From that point forward, the conflict shifted in a way the audience could feel even if they couldn't explain it. Mike no longer fought Archie as an enemy to defeat. He challenged him as a wounded man shaped by inherited fear. The shouting never disappeared, but its meaning changed. Anger gave way to understanding, and understanding made the conflict human. That truth didn't stay on the set. It followed Reiner long after the cameras stopped rolling. It changed how he thought about storytelling, about confrontation, about responsibility. When All in the Family ended in 1979, Carroll O'Connor walked away carrying Archie Bunker on his back. The public never separated the man from the character. Letters poured in by the thousands. Some accused him of racism. Others praised Archie as a truth-teller or even a hero. Many assumed O'Connor shared the beliefs he spent years exposing. The nuance was lost. The intention was ignored. Reiner watched this quietly, and for the first time, the imbalance felt wrong. He had seen the care, the restraint, the burden O'Connor carried on purpose, and yet the public conversation flattened everything into accusation or applause. What Reiner had learned in that storeroom years earlier now mattered more than ever. He knew Archie's hatred was inherited, examined, and deliberately revealed, not endorsed. He also knew O'Connor despised everything Archie represented off camera. In real life, O'Connor was reserved, almost shy. He avoided Hollywood parties. He preferred books to crowds. He spoke carefully, choosing words with intention. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He was thoughtful and contained. In interviews, O'Connor described Archie as a man who never smiled and never had anything kind to say. He explained that such bitterness wasn't chosen. It was passed down like a disease. Not an excuse, an explanation. That distinction mattered deeply to Reiner. That lesson reshaped his entire worldview. As he moved fully into directing, the influence became impossible to miss. His stories stopped revolving around winning arguments. They started focusing on understanding damage. Less villains, more wounded people, less victory, more exposure. In Stand By Me, he explored how childhood wounds quietly shape adulthood long after the bruises disappear. It wasn't about nostalgia. It was about memory, loss, and the scars that never fully heal. In A Few Good Men, he pushed that idea further. He showed how authority teaches obedience long before morality ever gets a chance to speak. Orders come first. Conscience comes later. Reiner later admitted that this way of thinking, this refusal to simplify, came directly from Carroll O'Connor, from watching a man willingly carry ugliness so the truth could stay visible. Carroll O'Connor taught him something essential that most creators never truly learn. You don't lecture the audience into reflection. You don't explain the lesson or underline the point. You let characters expose themselves honestly, and judgment follows naturally. That idea wasn't just advice. It became a rule, a discipline, a way of working that reshaped everything Rob Reiner touched afterward. That principle became the backbone of Reiner's directing style. Less speeches, less moral hand-holding, more truth, more silence, more moments where the audience had to sit with discomfort instead of being told what to feel. Less instruction, more revelation. The camera didn't argue anymore, it observed. And that shift traced directly back to years spent across a living room from Archie bunker. Despite decades of rumors and online speculation, Reiner was always clear about one thing when asked directly. "We didn't fight off camera," he said. "We had enormous affection for each other." That affection didn't look like what people expect from Hollywood friendships. It wasn't loud. It wasn't public. It wasn't performative. They didn't chase headlines together. They didn't pose for cameras. They didn't sell a friendship for approval. Their bond lived in trust, restraint, and shared standards. It existed in long silences, mutual respect, and an understanding that the work came first, always. When Carroll O'Connor died in 2001, Reiner didn't rush to explain their history. He didn't flood interviews with emotion. He didn't rewrite the narrative or defend himself. He chose silence, believing the work already said everything that mattered. But silence has a cost. Over time, Reiner realized that silence allows confusion to survive, and confusion slowly hardens into false narratives. Stories get simplified, intentions get flattened, and the truth gets buried under repetition. Only with age and distance did Reiner begin to understand that letting those misunderstandings linger felt wrong. At 78, he finally spoke, not defensively, not nostalgically, and not for performance. There was no need to protect myths anymore. No need to polish legacies or soften truths that once felt too heavy to say out loud. Time had done what interviews never could. It stripped everything down to its core. What remained wasn't anger, it wasn't regret, it was clarity. A quiet sense of responsibility to finally say what had gone unsaid for decades. Reiner now understands something most people never fully grasped. Carroll O'Connor devoted his life to one of the most dangerous tasks an actor can take on, embodying hatred so honestly that it could never be mistaken for virtue. He knew exactly what he was risking. He knew some viewers would cheer Archie bunker instead of questioning him. He knew others would miss the point entirely. And he knew that once the character entered American culture, control would be lost. He also knew many people would confuse the character with the man playing him. He accepted that burden anyway, not because it was safe, not because it was comfortable, but because exposing ugliness truthfully mattered more than being liked. That choice required restraint most people never have to practice. It meant letting others project onto you, letting yourself be misunderstood, letting the work speak even when it cost you personally. "He was one of the kindest men I ever met," Reiner said later. "People thought maybe Archie lived inside him. He didn't." That sentence carries decades of weight. It isn't defensive, it isn't dramatic. It's simply true. For years, Reiner watched audiences applaud Archie's cruelty or condemn O'Connor personally. He watched people laugh at lines that were meant to disturb. He watched praise and outrage blur together, and almost no one asked what it cost to carry that role for so long. O'Connor rarely defended himself publicly. He didn't explain Archie. He didn't correct misunderstandings. He didn't chase validation. He trusted that the work, over time, would reveal the truth. That trust came with isolation. Only now does Reiner fully grasp how lonely that choice must have been. To be praised, hated, or misunderstood in silence for the sake of the story. To carry moral discomfort so others could confront it safely from their couches. Looking back, Reiner admits something surprising. His fear on the All in the Family set was never about conflict or confrontation. It wasn't about being shouted at or challenged. It was about failing O'Connor's standard. Every pause mattered. Every silence mattered. Every improvised exchange carried an unspoken test. Was it honest, or was it easy? Was it comfortable, or was it true? What once felt like relentless pressure now reveals itself as mentorship in its purest form. No praise, no ego, no reassurance. Just a demand for honesty. O'Connor never asked for loyalty. He never asked for admiration. He never asked to be liked. He asked for truth, the truth. And that expectation reshaped Reiner forever. Reiner finally says it plainly, without embellishment and without hesitation. Carroll O'Connor carried America's ugliest character so others wouldn't have to. He absorbed the hatred, the confusion, the moral discomfort, and he did it without becoming the man he portrayed. That distinction matters. So what do you think? Was Carroll O'Connor misunderstood or perfectly understood just too late? Leave your thoughts in the comments. If this story surprised you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more untold truths behind television's most dangerous legends.